All right. The date, September 18th, 1927. The time, well, it wasn't Monday Night Football, I can tell you that much. The teams, the New York Football Giants at the Orange Athletic Club. The place, the Knights of Columbus Stadium. Now, this was, so obviously, obviously, it wasn't the Polo Grounds. So it was the Orange Athletic Club. They're also called the Orange, the Golden Stars. They're also called possibly like the Tornadoes. So they had a couple of different names, but there was the Orange Athletic Club in Orange, New Jersey. I'm going to read some stuff, basically some of them pretty much like from Wikipedia and all. But the Orange Athletic Club, they've been around for a while. I'm going to read some stuff from Wikipedia, and it's going to show you, they've been around for a while. They were actually in, this particular season, 1927, they weren't they were an independent team. They were reasonably a good team. They did play in the NFL for 2 seasons, and it didn't work out real well. As we'll go over, one year they were in Orange, New Jersey, and then the next year they went to Newark, New Jersey, and just didn't work. They were not very good at scoring points. And the second season, I believe, was when they were in Newark. Their record was just horrible, so they sold their franchise back to the NFL. But this would be a brand new year for the Giants. The first year Giants in 1925, they finished 8-4. 1926, they were 8-4-1. This year as well, they would play 13 games once again, but they would finish 11-1-1, and they would win the championship. So we got a long way to go. This is just game number 1. It is an exhibition game, but it's an early exhibition game. It's the earliest game, kind of like the Giants really have ever played. September 18th. But it was, very, very, very good. Obviously, a very good team. Their defense was simply marvelous, might I add. In 13 games, they only gave up 20 points. They only got scored on. They gave up 3 touchdowns. They didn't give up a field goal all season long. Imagine that, right? They gave up 3 touchdowns. Their nemesis, though, was the Cleveland Bulldogs, and they played the Cleveland Bulldogs 2 times. They tied the Cleveland Bulldogs, and they lost to the Cleveland Bulldogs. But what it would do, it would give the Benny Friedman. He came from Michigan. He was like Joe Montana. Back then it was basically a basketball they were playing with. It was rather round, the ball, but this guy could throw the ball. He was really good. He was fantastic in Michigan, and he was really, really good in the pros. And he would, 1929, he would become part of the New York Giants for a few seasons. But this was the first, I don't know if you want to say taste or the Tim Mara, Dr. Harry March, and even Wellington Mara, who was out scouting, at his young age, right? That they would see of Benny Friedman, but obviously I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. But I said their arch nemesis was the Cleveland Bulldogs. This particular season, everybody else they beat had a very good defense. And decent offense. It was obviously good enough to win, but there was a lot of turnover. I got a book here I read. The cover. I've been reading it so much, the cover ripped and everything I get. Let's see here. Hold on here. I used to have the cover on. It says the Giants of is it the Giants of New York? Is that what it's called? Yeah, it's called The Giants of New York. Good book. It starts basically off with the 1925 season, right, and works its way up to the 1962 season. unfortunately, he printed it basically a year, or put it out a year early, because unfortunately, it doesn't have the '63 season in there where they went to the championship game once again. Unfortunately, of course, they lost, but it goes from 1925 to 1962, so it covers a little bit. One of the chapters basically is the 1927 season, so I'll read some of that too. It's got a lot of reading to do here. Then to wrap it all up, toward the end of the video, I have I think it's 5 different articles that I took out of newspapers. None of them, have real in-depth and detailed coverage, because once again, it's a exhibition game. Right? There had some coverage. Basically, a lot of the all 5 of the articles kind of around said the kind of same thing, right? But I'll read them. Each one says maybe a little something different or whatever. But when I get to that, I'll read all those articles. But once again, it was an exhibition game. Especially early on in the season, like the first season when the Giants played 1925. They played the Newark Red Jackets on September 27th, 1925. There wasn't much coverage at all about that one. Then the next week they played the all New Britain team in Connecticut. There really wasn't a ton on that one either. That was on October 4th, 1925. That was the week just before they started their regular season. So 1925, there had 2 exhibition games. There wasn't a lot of coverage on it. So there wasn't a ton on this one, but there was something, right? Now, it was always a lot of turnover. If I remember correctly, there was 29 players, okay, on the 1925 New York Giants, right? Well, when 1926 rolled around, only 12 of those, I'm not going to go over them all, but there was 12 of the 29 players were from the 25 wound on the 26 team. So in that 1 year, the Giants lost 17 different players. 17 players, were gone. So a lot of, I think there's a lot of turnover now. There was a lot of turnover back then. Lots. But when the 1927 season rolled around, there was only 5 guys, right? From the 1925 team that played on the 1925, 1926, and the 1927 team. Only 5 guys. So that's a lot of turnover. Doc Alexander, Hinkie Haynes, Jack McBride, Earl Pottinger. It's either Pot or Pottinger. He happens to be, he's there. I'll go over this and just say he's their head coach. So you got Doc Alexander, Earl Pottinger. It's Potteiger. So I think it's Pot. Like Mott's applesauce, M-O-T-T. Mott's applesauce, so Pottiger. So Doc Alexander, Earl Pottinger, Jack McBride, Hinkie Haynes, and I got you, Babe Parnell. So those are the only 5 guys that were on the 1925 New York Giants, the 1926 New York Giants, and the 1927 New York Giants. So there was a lot of turnover. As I was mentioning, so this is the 3rd season. Every year the Giants had a different coach. But this Earl Pottinger, once again, I think it's Pottinger, Potteiger. He will be the first Giant manager or coach to manager's baseball coach. He would be a coach to be the Giants coach for 2 seasons. He had the best of both worlds. He had the 1927 Giants were 11-1-1 and won the championship. Yeah. Then in 1928, he had the first Giants team that had a losing record. So he's seen the tops of that Mount Everest, and he saw the abyss of the ocean, baby. He saw everything, right, in those 2 seasons. He had the highs and he had the lows, right? So then in 1929, we got another coach, Leroy Andrews. So he was with the Giants for 2 seasons. But 1925, we had Bob Folwell. 1926, we had Doc Alexander. In 1927, the new coach would be Earl Pottinger. Now, in this book here, it'll go over a little bit of what happened. Doc Alexander, okay, was a doctor, right? And a lot of his time was taken up with his doctor duties. Now, a lot of times, there was times when he was the man. I keep saying manager. He was the coach of the Giants in 1926. Doc Alexander. They used to have their practices because a lot of guys used to work. Had to work. It's unlike it is today, where they play one season and they can basically survive for the rest of their lives off of. Some of these guys can survive off of one season, but it's not the way it was back then, right? So a lot of guys worked. So Doc Alexander, he was a doctor, and a lot of times they would have to practice obviously in the afternoon. Well, there were times where he would get caught up at his doctor duties, and sometimes he would either come late. Like he might show up in the afternoon, practice would already be starting. The guys would be doing whatever. And the coach wasn't even there because he was, doing his doctor duties. And apparently from what I was reading, there was sometimes he didn't even show up because he was, once again, preoccupied with being a doctor, right? Well, the thing is that, they kind of wanted like more of a full-time coach. As I said, I'll read some of this stuff out of this book here. They fired him from being a coach. He was still on the Giants team. He only played in a couple games. He didn't play many games. But he was still a member of the team. So then they picked out Earl Pottinger to be the new coach of the Giants. But the Orange Athletic Club. So they had a nice history. They were around for a little while. So let me read some of this here. This is basically straight out of Wikipedia here. All right. Now it's basically it's the Orange and Newark, and they were basically pretty much a nickname seemed pretty much like it was kind of consistent, was the Tornadoes. All right. So this is like right out of Wikipedia. All of this stuff that I'm reading here, I'll have like maybe I'll have some links maybe in the description box or something. But this is pretty much straight out of Wikipedia here. It says the Orange Tornadoes and the Newark Tornadoes were two manifestations of a long-lived professional American football franchise that existed in some form from 1887 until 1941. And from 1958 to 1970. I'm not going to read over all of it, But having played the American Amateur Football Union from 1888 to 1895, the National Football League, and they played in the National Football League from 1929 to 1930, and then they were the American Association from 1936 to 41. So they had a bunch of different. They were in a bunch of different leagues throughout their history. The early years. The Orange Tornadoes can trace their roots back to the Orange Athletic Club. Okay. The Orange AC, or the Orange Athletic Club, was originally an amateur football team that began playing in 1887. So they got some roots that went back quite a few years. We're here at 1927. Okay. And they went back to 1887. So they went back 40 years. The team's first ever game was a 36-0 loss to the Seton Hall University football team. By the 1890s, the Orange became a semi-pro team. In 1892, the team practiced under electric lights at night to prepare for an October 8th game against Rutgers College. The Orange Athletic Club would go on to win that game 22-10. In 1893, the team won the American Football Union Championship after posting an 8-2 record. In 1902, the Orange Athletic Club played against the Philadelphia Phillies and the Philadelphia Athletics of the National Football League. The team also played in World Series of Football in that year at Madison Square Garden. In 1902, Orange lost to the All-Syracuse team 36-0. However, the team returned to the World Series of Football in 1903 when they played the Watertown Red and Black and the eventual champion, the Franklin Athletic Club. Orange lost to Watertown 11-0 and to Franklin 12-0. However, it did manage to defeat the Oreo Athletic Club of Asbury Park 22-0. Okay, we're getting to the where they start joining the NFL, but this is pre-NFL. The Orange team became an established independent pro team from 1919 until 1928 under the nickname the Orange Athletic Club Golden Tornadoes. During this time, Orange defeated the New York Brickley Giants, who were around from 1920 to 1921. They also played the pre-NFL versions of the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets and the Staten Island Stapletons. They also played against the Atlantic City Roses and the Millville Big Blue, two of the top independent teams of the 20s. By 1928, Orange held the New York Giants and Frankfurt Yellow Jackets to close scores. On September 16, 1928, Orange held the 1927 NFL champion New York Giants to just a 7. The Giants won 7-0. A week earlier, the NFL's previous champions, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, were held to a 12-0 score. Orange showed that their team could compete in the NFL. While the Golden Tornadoes played in Orange, a separate Newark Bears played in the original American Football League, which lasted one season. The American Football League was in 1926. 1926, a season in Newark, unrelated to the Tornadoes team that would later take on that identity. That Newark Bears club was later absorbed into the Staten Island Stapletons. All right, so now in Wikipedia here, within 1920, they're only in the NFL for 2 seasons, right? 1929 and 1930. So here's the 1929 season, kind of in a nutshell, right? 1929, Ole Hogsrud, the owner of the Duluth Eskimos, sold his NFL franchise rights for the Eskimos to Piggy. I'm going to say Simandl. Simandl. I'll just call him Piggy. Right? A wholesale meat salesman and sports promoter from Orange, who named his franchise the Orange Tornadoes. This is 1929. The Tornadoes played their home games at Knights of Columbus Stadium, where this game with the Giants, okay, going to play them. The first game for the new team was a scoreless tie against the New York Giants on September 29th, 1929. A week later, the team recorded its first NFL win by defeating the Boston Bulldogs 7-0. The victory came off of a short pass. They threw a pass and the guy ran 60 yards for a touchdown. However, the following week, the Orange experienced its first NFL loss, a 7-0 defeat to the 1928 NFL champions, the Providence Steamroller. The team regrouped on October 19, 1929, and the Tornadoes held the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets to a 6-6 tie in Frankfurt Stadium. A week later, the team rallied from a 13-0 deficit to defeat the Boston Bulldogs 19-13. On October 29, 1929, the Bulldogs and the Tornadoes met again to play in Pottsville, Pennsylvania. Prior to 1929, the Bulldogs played as the Pottsville Maroons, and the teams played for their still loyal fans at the Maroons Minersville Park. This time, however, the Tornadoes lost 6-0 by way of a 4-yard touchdown run. On October 3rd, the Tornadoes held the Staten Island Stapletons to a scoreless tie at Thompson Stadium. Thompson Stadium is where the Staten Island Stapletons played at. During that game, the Stapletons were within scoring distance 3 times, but to no avail. Meanwhile, the Tornadoes only penetrated the Staten Island Stapletons, the 20-yard line, 1 time. Staten Island, they seemed like the Orange Athletic Club seemed like they had a decent defense. Their offense was never super spectacular. Orange then lost a rematch with the Giants 22-0 a week later, but after a scoreless tie against Frankfurt, the Orange defeated the Staten Island Stapletons 3-0. However, the next game against the Chicago Cardinals resulted in a 26-0 loss. The Cardinals, The Tornadoes then ended their 1929 season with a 10-0 loss to Frankfurt. They finished with a 3-5-4 record, scoring only 35 points in 12 games. So basically, they averaged like 3 points a game. And they gave up 80 points. So they didn't give up a ton of points, but they just couldn't score any points. All right, so 1930. This is their second season in the NFL. The team's fortune in the NFL changed for the worse after it moved to Newark in 1930. Basically, the Orange, New Jersey, Newark are relatively close, but, during the team's time in Newark, it played its home games at the Newark School Stadium. Their head coach defected to buy the Dayton Triangles, moving that team to Brooklyn and transforming that team into the Brooklyn Dodgers. He took most of the members of the 1929 Tornadoes with him. So the team got even weaker, and I'll show you by their record. The 1930 record was really bad. So unfortunately, the team that they had, which wasn't that horrible in 1929, their coach took a lot of those good players with him. And they really suffered in 1930. Meanwhile, the Tornadoes went through 3 coaches during the 1930 season. And the team's only victory during the 1930 season was against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. The last game of the Newark Tornadoes was against the New York Giants, a 34-7 loss on October 29, 1930. The franchise ended league play after the 1930 season and was sold back to the NFL. The league ordered the franchise sold to the highest bidder prior to the 1931 season, but there were no takers, and the team took the field as the Cleveland Indians under league ownership. In 1932, a Boston-based group won a new NFL franchise and was awarded the remains of the failed Newark organization. The new team would be named the Boston Braves, who would become the Boston Redskins, who would become known as the Washington Redskins. Yeah, and you need a scorecard here. The Washington Redskins, the Washington football team, now the Washington Commanders, right? So in 1932, a Boston-based group bought the franchise, and they were named the Boston Braves, now the Washington Commanders. However, the NFL does not consider Washington to be a continuation of the Tornadoes, just as it does not consider the Tornadoes to be a continuation of the Duluth Eskimos. So, let's see. We got here. The Orange team was an independent pro team from 1919 until 1928, playing as the Orange Athletic Golden Tornadoes. Memorably, in 1928, Orange held the New York Giants and Frankfurt Yellow Jackets to close scores. In mid-September, Orange held the former champions, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, to just 12 points. On September 16, 1928, Orange held the NFL champion Giants to just 7-0 score. I think that a lot of this said this in Wikipedia too. Orange was ready to compete in the fledgling National Football League. In 1929, Orange had a shot at the big time. I think I read all of this stuff here. Yeah. This was another article here that I saw, but it pretty much says the kind of same thing. Says we got the Knights of Columbus Stadium. The Knights of Columbus Stadium, which is where this game is being played at between the Giants and the Orange Athletic Club. Knights of Columbus Stadium was a football stadium located in East Orange, New Jersey, along Main Street. The stadium was used by the Orange Tornadoes of the National Football League in 1929. However, the Tornadoes first moved into the stadium in 1926. When they were still called the Orange Athletic Club. The Tornadoes briefly moved to Newark, New Jersey in 1930. However, after a disastrous season, the team moved back to Orange and played independently at the stadium from 1931 to 1935. The team also played at Knights of Columbus Stadium in 1936 as a member of the American Association. The largest crowd that was in 1929 was 9,000 people who attended the season opener on September 29th. The smallest crowd of the season was 1,500 people on November 17th. Former Orange player Ernest Cuneo once wrote that the attendance mainly ran in the range between 2,500 to 3,000 fans at nights at Columbus Field, which was low even for a depression year. That was one of the things too that really, especially, especially if you're not fielding a good team. Right around 1929 is when the bottom fell out and the depression started, and people just didn't have money. And especially they really were not going to have money to go out and especially see a very bad football team. Now, this is Wikipedia. The 1929 NFL season, was the one year that the Orange Tornadoes, were in the NFL. The Knights of Columbus Stadium, and Jack Depler was their head coach. Now, as I said, they finished the season 3 wins, 5 losses, and 4 ties. So, not quite 500, but they had a lot of ties. 4 ties. They had 3 wins and 5 losses. I said they only scored 35 points. They only gave up 80 points, which was really very, very good. It's just they couldn't score any points. So that made it very, very difficult. So then that was in 1929. So in 1930, right, they went from Orange, New Jersey to Newark, where they became the Newark Tornadoes. They played in the Newark Schools Stadium, and they had 3 different coaches. Al McGill looked like he coached for 3 games. Andy Salata and Jack Fish. I guess they combined for like the final 9 games of the season. But they did. They finished dead last. They finished there. Well, actually, they were tied with the Minneapolis Red Jackets, who only had 1 win. But the Minneapolis Red Jackets in 1930 were 1-7-1. The Newark Tornadoes were 1-10-1. And in those 12 games, they scored 51 points. They gave up 190, so they were not a very good team at all. They were just going backwards. So after the season was over with, the name still carried on, but those are the only 2 seasons that they were in the professional football, the NFL, just 2 seasons. Basically between the 2 seasons, 1929 and 1930, the Orange Tornadoes and the Newark Tornadoes, they only won 4 games. So it was not a banner season for them, that is for sure. But for the Giants, it was a very, very good. Very, very good season. Very good season. All right. Now, what I'll do is I'll read a little bit out of this book I got here. Right. Book. It's, of course, the Giants of New York. It just starts off a little bit like about the beginning of the season, like how the Giants lost a bunch of guys. They went out. Harry March, their first secretary, Harry March, Dr. Harry March, another doctor. And the new coach, they went out and they brought in a whole bunch of new guys. They had a very, very good team. Very, very, very good team in 1927. All right, so Chapter 4 starts off. Chapter 4. Powerhouse in the Polo Grounds. The war was over and the American League was dead. Now, the American League, this is 1927 we're talking about. 1926, there was the American Football League, the first American Football League. They were in existence for 1 season. It did not do good. It folded after 1 season. Right? They had 9 teams. 5 of them folded before the end of the season was over. So they started with 9 teams, the American Football League in 1926. By the time the season was over, they only had 4 teams left. It was not doing very good. The survivors had paid dearly. So what it was basically what the problem was with the American Football League in 1926, they went head-to-head with the NFL. The NFL wound up winning, but basically there was almost no winners. There was, but there wasn't. They almost every team lost money. The Giants lost a bunch of money because one of the teams in the American Football League was the New York Yankees. They played in the Yankee Stadium. The Giants played in the Polo Grounds. If you ever see a picture of what the Polo Grounds and what Yankee Stadium is at, there's basically just like a river. like, go between the two stadiums. It's separated by like hundreds of feet. And a lot of times they were playing the games the same time, and they're trying to, fight to get whatever crowds they can get in there. And basically, they were just hurting each other. So a lot of teams lost a lot of money. But thankfully, the American Football League only lasted one season, 1926. It was over with. So 1927 rolled around. The Giants were hopefully looking maybe to start making some money, right? Because they lost some money. A lot of teams lost money in 1926. Let's see. The survivors had paid dearly, but they had learned their economic lesson well. Professional football might have a major league future, but not in the minor league towns of Hammond. I mean, one thing they did do was after 1926, they cut out a lot of the dead teams, a lot of the teams that were smaller teams, like the Hammond Pros, the Hartford Blues, the Racine, I think it's the Racine Tornadoes. They got rid of those teams. A bunch of teams they got rid of. Meeting at the New York Astor Hotel in February of 1927, the National Football League, a sprawling collection of 22 franchises, decided to reorganize. The new NFL had only 12 teams, so they got rid of 10 teams. They went from 22 down to 12 in one season. Had greater balance and tighter organizations. Proven players suddenly were plentiful, salaries were lower, and fan interest was higher. In New York, Giants owner Tim Mara seemed surprisingly confident. This is the year we take the championship, predicted Mara. Ooh, how right he would be. This is the year we would take the championship, predicted Mara, who had replaced Billy Gibson as Giants president in name as well as in fact. Billy Gibson was the Giants president for 1925 and 1926. I'll be very surprised if anyone beats us. To the other owners, placidly savoring the joys of peace, Mara's bristling optimism seemed totally unrealistic. They were in seventh place in 1926 with a record of 8-4-1. The Giants had lost 8 regulars. This is where I'll start going to some of the players. I'll start talking about some of the players. Giants had lost 8 regulars, including all-star ends Lynn Bomar and Tilly Voss. Yep, I said Tilly. Tilly Voss. And figured to drop even lower in 1927. But Mara and Doc Harry March, the Giants secretary, Dr. Harry March, they lost some guys, but Mara and March, they weren't staying idle. They had some stuff up their sleeves. I don't care what it costs, but get the players you need, said Mara. I want a winner this year. See, Mara was a bookkeeper. He was into some other things too, but I mean, he was like the owner of the Giants, the founder of the Giants, but he was also a bookkeeper, and he made some money, made some good money as a bookkeeper, and he kept funding the Giants to try to just keep them going, and he can go out and get good players. Basically, if you could afford it. Right? It was like the wild, wild west back then. If you could afford it, you can go out and get whatever players you wanted to, right? There was no salary cap. You can pay the players whatever you wanted to, bring in whatever good players you wanted, right? March's first decision was an unpleasant one, which is something I just talked about, but a necessary one. He had to fire Dr. Joe Alexander, who was the coach of the Giants in 1926. An original Giant and one of football's finest linemen as the head coach. They had to fire him. Increasingly preoccupied with his medical duties, he did not have enough time, because he was a doctor, so he was not able to, give the Giants enough of his time. Dr. Alexander had found himself with less and less time available for football. And in 1927, he was part of the Giants. I think he only played like 2 games. He didn't start any. He was a substitute, so he didn't play in a lot of games. To replace him, March named Ursinus halfback Earl Pottinger, Alexander's assistant in 1926, and an average player whose greatest asset seemed to be his popularity with teammates and with Dr. Harry March. Now, Earl Pottinger was with the Giants for 4 seasons. 4. What am I talking about? Yeah, because he coached them. He was one. I think he was only one of 3 guys, I think, to be on all the first 4 seasons. But Earl Pottinger, he played every year for the Giants. He played in games, but he only played in a minimal amount of games every year. He did not play. He was not a superstar by any stretch of imagination. But together, March and Potty began to study college rosters, interview unattached professionals, and mold Marist champions. By the time they had finished, the Giants had 10 new players, and the Polo Grounds had the makings of its first powerhouse. By far the most impressive of the newcomers was a mammoth end. Robert Cal Hubbard was a quiet giant of a man, standing 6'5" and 245 pounds, and wearing a size 8.5 hat. So he was one of the guys that they brought in. Let's see here. By the time the Giants reported to preseason practice, March and Pottinger had done some brilliant recruiting. The line was stronger and the backfield was faster. The best of the newcomers was N. Charles Corrigan, guard Ed Garvey, tackle Dick Stallman, backs Mule Wilson of Texas A&M, versatile Doug Wyckoff of Georgia Tech, 155-pound Tut, like King Tut, Tut Imlay. Oh, yeah, word to your mother, Tut Imlay of California, and Joe Guyon, a temperamental, ageless Indian. He's a future Hall of Famer, too. But he was getting up there in age, though. But Joe Guyon, a temperamental, ageless Indian who had played college football with Jim Thorpe at Carlisle 16 years before. Said football was a different game then, said captain and tackle Steve Owen, who would become the Giants' head coach in 1931 and be the coach from 1931 to 1953. The ball was bigger and harder to pass. You know, when he's talking about 1927, it was just big, it was round, very difficult to pass the ball. You couldn't pass from closer than 5 yards from behind the line of scrimmage. You had to be at least 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage to throw a pass. Who cares where you're at? But you had to be 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And in 1927, to make it even more, I don't know why. I don't know. Some of the stuff I just don't understand. They had a hard time scoring points, period. So I don't know. 1927, they decided to take the goalposts that were on the goal line and move them back 10 yards and make the field goals even more longer. So they moved the goalpost back 10 yards from the goal line. But the big difference was the way we played the game. We were pretty much a smash and shove gang. We were bone crushers, not fancy Dans. So now this is where we get into this game here. Game against the Orange Athletic Club, all right? The Giants certainly, apparently, there was some fisticuffs flying. I don't think it's in any of these articles I'm going to read. I don't think it says anything at all. I could be wrong about the fisticuffs. The Giants certainly didn't play like champions in the first exhibition game. A wild, brawling 6-0 victory over the Orange Athletic Club in New Jersey. The game was scoreless until the final quarter. This is it's almost kind of like the first game the Giants ever played, September 27th, 1925. They played the Newark Red Jackets. right? And the game was scoreless going into the last period. And they finally, with a few minutes left to go, Dutch Hendrian, I think it was, kicked a 30-yard field goal, I believe it was, and the Giants won 3-0. Yeah, kind of the same thing here. They're playing an exhibition game against a team that's just an independent. They're not an NFL club or nothing like that. And the game was scoreless going into the final period. And the Giants in this game didn't even really offensive, didn't even score. The Giants won a 6-0 victory over the Orange Athletic Club in New Jersey. The game was scoreless until the final quarter when Mule Wilson broke it open with a 70-yard, no offense, with a 70-yard run with an intercepted pass. Picked the pass off and ran it back. All the way down the field, Hubbard leading, Cal Hubbard leading the interference, needled Wilson, who could run the 109.8 when he was in top shape. So Cal kept saying, "Come on, Mule," shouted Big Cal. "Come on, Mule. Keep up with me if you can." Still out of shape, Mule couldn't and was tackled on the Orange 15-yard line. So apparently, he picked the pass off way down deep in Giants territory, ran it back 70 yards. I guess he must have picked it off at the 15. Ran it back 70 yards. It was out of shape. Right? Got tackled at the 15-yard line. 4 plays later, though, rugged 185-pound fullback Jack McBride, very good player for the Giants. One of the shining stars, one of the original. Hinkie Haynes, Jack McBride were some of the shining stars for the Giants the first few seasons. I think we're all on the Giants, for the first 4 seasons, 25 to 28. But there were some big stars for the Giants back then. Jack McBride punched over for the touchdown. And this is interesting too here. The Giants had loaned several of their second stringers to the Orange team, but once the game started, it was every man and every Giant for himself. Jim Kendricks, a beefy Giant tackle barred by Orange and Cal Hubbard's roommate, was kicked in the face early in the first quarter and was still complaining when the game finally ended. He said, "For Pete's sake," snapped Hubbard, "quit crying. You sound like a little girl." Kendricks stopped complaining and started punching, tossing a right hook at his roommate's head. Calmly and coolly, Hubbard palmed Kendricks' fist in his left hand and floored him with the right. Damn. Momentarily, 1,000 Orange fans were racing toward Hubbard and the Giants, determined to protect Kendricks, their hero, for a day. The officials finally stopped the fights, but seconds later, it started all over again. An Orange player had crept up behind Hubbard and aimed a punch at Big Cal's jaw. The punch missed, and Hubbard, who had run out of patience, split open his opponent's eye and lip. This time, the battle lasted until the police forces of 3 townships forcibly stopped it 1 hour later. That's a brawl. That's a brawl, folks. Beep, beep, beep. That's all, folks. That's a brawl. 1 hour. Whew. Man, imagine the ESPN highlights on that, huh? Woo. Let's see here. By the time the cops got there, says Hubbard, Kendricks and I were sitting in the locker room trying to figure out how the whole thing started. So this game was a heck of a brawl. They scored the 1 touchdown. They missed the extra point. They wound up winning 6-0. So I'll tell you what. But I'll tell you what. The fight lasted almost an hour. Whew! I'll tell you what. That's a brawl. All right. So I got the articles here. Oh, let me read this one here first. Okay. The first pro game won by football Giants. New York 11 defeats Orange Athletic Club 6-0 before a crowd of 3,000 people. This is from the New York Times. And all the articles pretty much say kind of the same thing, and there's not a lot of coverage on it. Actually, I think there's more coverage in this book here. than in these articles. So, but in Orange, New Jersey, let's see, September 18th, the Tim Mara's New York Football Giants opened their 1927 season here this afternoon by defeating the Orange Athletic Club 11 by 6-0 in a stubbornly contested game before a crowd of 3,000 people. Mule Wilson paved the way for the only touchdown when he intercepted a forward pass and ran 70 yards to the 15-yard marker before he was downed. After a series of plunges, Jack McBride plunged over for the score, but he missed a try for the extra point. That's all they had. They do have, which I'll go over here. I'll go over the starting lineups here. If I can X out of this here. Okay, let's try this again here. They got the starting lineups here. Let's see. All right, we got for the starting left end was Jappy for the Giants. Steve Owen was the starting left tackle. Murtaugh was the left guard. Looks like Biggs was the center. Nesser was the right guard. Stallman was the right tackle. Cal Hubbard was the right end. Tut Imlay was the quarterback. Hinkie Haynes was the left halfback. McBride was the fullback. And Wyckoff was the right halfback. Giants scored just 6 points in the final quarter. That was it. Now for the Orange Athletic Club, their starting left end was Stein. Their left tackle was Williams. Their left guard was Lincoln. Looks like their center was Clarkin. Right guard was Smith. Right tackle was Douglas. Right end was Baldwin. Their quarterback was O'Neill. Their left halfback was Weiss. Kendrick, the guy who got in a fight, was their right halfback, and their fullback was Bankert. All right. So that was all right. That was that. That was the New York Times. Okay, here. Another one here. We have Orange Gritters lose before 3,000. Now this page here, it's kind of like it's not flat. It's like wrapped around. So some of this is cut off. They did not do a very good job of this one, might I add. It says Orange, New Jersey, September 18th. Mara's New York Football Giants opened their 1927 season here yesterday afternoon by defeating the Orange Athletic Club 11. It's the same thing, pretty much. 6-0 in a stubbornly contested game before a crowd of 3,000. Mule Wilson paved the way for the touchdown when he intercepted a forward pass and ran 70 yards to the 15-yard marker before he was down. After a series of line plunges, Jack McBride plunged over for the score, but he missed the extra point. So it's basically the same thing as got said on the other thing. I'm not sure if all of these say the same exact thing. Here's another one that says the same exact thing. New York Football Giants win. And it says the same exact thing. A lot of these are sometimes you find that quite a bit, the ones that are happening. Here we go. Here's something that says a little bit different here. I think it has a little bit more. Oh, wait. All right, here we go. The Giants presented a powerful defense, holding the home players to 2 first downs. Basically, the top here says the same exact thing. It says here, this article says, Football Giants win in debut. Tim Mara's New York Football Giants opened their 1927 season here yesterday afternoon by defeating the Orange Athletic Club 11 by a score of 6-0 in a stubbornly contested game before a crowd of 3,000 people. Mule Wilson paved the way for the only touchdown when he intercepted a forward pass and ran it back 70 yards to the 15-yard marker before he was down. So that must have meant when he caught the ball at his own 15-yard line. And back then, you were not allowed. It wasn't like you could drop back and you could throw the ball way downfield. A lot of times, there was a period of time, I know, you can only throw the ball no more than 20 yards down the field. So if you drop back 5 yards, you can only throw it 20 yards down the field. So you can throw a ball no more than like 25 yards. If you're back 5 yards and you can, so if he picked the pass off at his own 15, that meant the other team was, was in the Giants' half of the field, right? So you got Mule Wilson got tackled at the Orange Athletic Club 15-yard line. Jack McBride plunged over for the score, but he missed a try for the extra point. The Giants presented a powerful defense, holding the home players to 2 first downs. But though they gained considerable yardage, the Mara men lacked consistency in their attack. So the Giants apparently gained a bunch of yardage, but it doesn't say here, they missed a bunch of field goals, or they may be walking up and down the field a bunch of times, but they threw interceptions, or they had a fumble, or doesn't tell you. I mean, a lot of times with these exhibition games, sometimes there's just not a lot of coverage. And unfortunately for the Giants, when they played their exhibition games, they did not play them at home. They played them elsewhere. If they played the game at home, which they really didn't do because they were sharing the Polo Grounds with the Giants, and I think they didn't start playing in the Polo Grounds until after the baseball season was over, because they didn't want to go in there and start chewing up the field and have the baseball Giants try to play baseball games in there with a chewed up field. So a lot of the Giants games early on were always on the road. So when they were on the road and they were in different states, like the New York Daily News, the New York Times, they didn't really have much coverage on it. Yeah, so not a lot here. Unlike maybe nowadays, right? If the Giants are playing a preseason game, the Giants and Jets are playing a preseason game. Well, the next day, if you go into the paper, there's a lot of coverage on it. Both 11s presented an all-star array of former intercollegiate stars. Doug Wyckoff of Georgia Tech and Tut Imlay, of California, excelled for the victors. That's the same. They have something here. It's the same thing here. Talks about Paul Jaffe was the start left end for the Giants. Steve Owen was the left tackle. Murtaugh was the left guard. Biggs was the Giants center. Nesser was their right guard. Stallman was the right tackle. Hubbard was the right end. Tut Imlay was the quarterback. Hinkie Haynes was the left halfback. Wyckoff was the right halfback, and Jack McBride was the fullback. So basically, it says the same thing there. All right, I got a couple more here. Where are we at here? Let's say it's probably going to say the same freaking thing. Yep. Giant Gritters win. Mara 11 opens with a 6-0 win over Orange. Says the same thing. Let's see here. All right, I got one more here. What do we got? Yep. Just says this. It's a longer version, but it says football Giants win first game from Orange 6-0, but it says the same exact thing as I said in all the other. The Giants presented a powerful defense, holding the home players to 2 first downs. But although the Giants outgained the Orange team by considerable yardage, the Mara men lacked consistency in their attack. Both 11s presented an all-star array of former intercollegiate stars. I mean, the Giants had a bunch of real good college all-stars on their team. Once again, talks about Doug Wyckoff of Georgia Tech and Tut Imlay of California excelled for the visitors. So there was not always a lot of good coverage. Some of it, a lot of it depends on, like certain teams. Like if you were Buffalo, okay, Buffalo, they did the newspaper. There was a lot of newspapers in Buffalo, and they did a very good job of covering their home teams. There were just certain, like Green Bay, the Packers. They usually had some good coverage. Teams from Buffalo. There was a couple other teams. Said the Giants were playing at home. They had good coverage, but if they were playing on the road, sometimes, some newspapers would have it, others wouldn't. As was showed was with these articles right here. A lot of them were just like the same articles got shared to other newspapers. There was nothing remotely different, very extremely different about those articles. They all pretty much said the same exact thing, and I had 6 different articles and all kinds. So basically, somebody printed out a couple paragraphs and just shared it with some other newspapers. So there wasn't a ton. on it. But once again, this was just an exhibition game. It was a warm-up game. And the following week, the Giants would start their season, right? They were off and running. They said in 1925, they played 12 regular season games. 1926, they played 13. And in 1927, once again, they would play 13 games as well, too. But this year, they would go 11-1-1. They only gave up 20 points. Back then, from 1920 to 1932, the team that had the best overall winning percentage was crowned the NFL champion. It wasn't until 1933 that they started championship games. They split everything up into two divisions. The teams that won in 1933, the two teams that won the divisions went head-to-head for the championship. Of course, in 1933 and 1934, both times it would be the Bears and the Giants going head-to-head. But from 1920 to 32, those 13 seasons, there was the team that had the best overall winning percentage. And the Giants, with a record of 11-1-1 at the end of the 1927, were the champions of the world. So we're just getting started here. Got an exhibition game here. The Giants. I mean, I tell you what, if the guy Mule Wilson didn't pick the pass off and run it back for a touchdown, the game probably would have ended in a scoreless tie, right? Because the Giants maybe had some offense, but if it wasn't for that intercepted pass that he ran it back 70 yards for, right, possibly the Giants may not have scored at all. So the game might have finished nothing. But New York Giants 6, the Orange Athletic Club 0. And so that's pretty much what happened on this day, September 18th, 1927, in New York football Giants history. I'll see you next time.